and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, and liberty and justice for all. Good evening and welcome to the January 28th, 2010 meeting of the Environmental Advisory Council of Radnor Township. We have an agenda for this evening that's going to have an adjustment. We do have a member of the public here with us tonight. We're going to take care of the election, the officer election, and review approval of minutes, and then we will insert her presentation right there for those that have the agenda. Jane Golis, okay? All right. So let's take care of some of the business first, the election of officers, nomination for chair.
I'd like to nominate Brenda Gatanda for another term.
Thank you. Please. Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Nomination for vice chair?
I'd like to nominate Josh Hilbert.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Congratulations.
Okay, and then the next item is the review and approval of the minutes. The minutes of the previous meeting from December 1st, 2009 were distributed to the EAC. Thanks again to Ann Poulin for preparing terrific minutes for us and making it also easy for us to keep track of what we've been doing. Does anyone have any corrections or changes or clarifications to the minutes? No?
I move to approve.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, great. Minutes are approved. Okay, now I'd like to invite Jane Golis to come up. She's a member of the public and had asked for about 5 minutes for a presentation on an issue that she's concerned with.
Thank you, Chairman and Council. I wish that, just wanted to ask the Council if they would look into extending the Radnor Township ordinance for controlling dogs, commonly called the leash law, to all pets, in particular cats. It's now many of the national organizations on animal welfare and the Humane Society, the Audubon Society, and other research institutes like the Cornell University's Ornithology Lab are now have good data that cats, free-roaming cats, have large impacts on our native species, particularly migratory birds and small mammals. And I would hope that the Environmental Council would possibly look at that and as controlling cats in the township and to lessen their impact on our native species. I gave you some information. And there's also another reason. Free-roaming cats also are a source of, a ready source of where rabies and distemper, Lyme disease, and other things can be brought in closer contact with humans. And that's another reason for not having them roaming free at large. And I would just hope that you could consider looking at some of the data and perhaps see what you would come up with.
We'll certainly take a look at that. And are there specific facts about things that are happening in the township that sort of brought this to your attention that we should be aware of? I know there was some talk about it at our last meeting because I think the Board of Health is considering it, but I thought there was some discussion about some areas where there's large congregations of cats.
Well, I know the township trapped cats in Garrett Hill this summer.
Okay.
Feral cats or stray cats or cats that were more cats than people could actually claim. And I also know that there's feral cat colonies on the western edge, or maybe one cat colony or whatever they're called, of the trail that people have been putting food out for. And I personally found a stray kitten in my yard this past fall, and there's a black stray cat, feral cat, that comes around my yard right now. So that is an issue of just feral cats or stray cats, but even cats that have homes that go outside also impact our native wildlife, because all cats hunt even when they're well fed. It's just a natural thing. They're a predatory animal. And it's just something that I think we should be concerned about in this day and age.
Okay, thanks. Does
And,
anyone have further questions?
I would just comment that it would be helpful for us to know what the different strategies are that have been used at the local level. And as I understand it, there have been efforts in some communities to rather than capture and euthanize those feral cats, to inoculate them, so to address the disease issue, but also to just limit the amount that people allow, unexpected litters of kittens to just go wild. Because I can imagine that that's one set of issues, and the other set of issues regarding, pet cats and controlling them in a way that's different from, that's a whole different set of issues. So I just think it would be useful for us to know what the models are.
Yeah, it seems to be something that it's in American society. Like, it seems to be that it's still acceptable for people just to open their door and let their cat out. And it's not acceptable for us to open our doors and let our dogs roam. And I don't understand that personally. But I did work at the zoo for a while when I was much younger. And it's just that I come from a different background. I think if you own an animal, you should be in control of it at all time. You shouldn't just let it out to roam. It's just something, that's just where I am. But I think that's my personal thing. But I think there's also good reasons in the environment today and best practices for not wanting exotic predators, impacting our native species. And I think there's data that I don't really know the numbers, but it goes into the millions that domestic cats kill migratory birds.
Mm-hmm.
That's one aspect, but I think there's other aspects. Is the health of the animals. It's not good. I mean, even if this trap, neuter, and release program, as some people are avow or think is a good idea. I don't think that letting an animal, just because you let it out to hunt, that's not a good life for that individual animal.
So I guess there's
not a wild animal.
Right, two issues that Robin had identified. One, you're asking for support in a proposal to extend a leash law to cats, so that would be cats that do have a home and a place to go.
Yeah, the other thing
But
is the other whole issue.
Right,
What to do
but
with
you're not
stray
addressing
animals.
that at this point, or do you have a proposal to address that?
No, I don't know what, that would be something, I think we have an ordinance on the books concerning animals that are property of residents, and I think that should be expanded to all animals, all pets. The stray cat situation is something I think we'd have to talk to the animal officer in charge, and how other districts handle that, I don't know.
And my only thought was that there may be one of those sources of, threat to migratory birds that's greater than the other. I mean,
Yeah, I don't.
there's a feral
I don't know.
cat that hangs
That
out
I
near my
don't
bird
know.
feeder, and so it drives
That I
me
don't
nuts.
know.
But
I think, it's almost two different discussions.
Okay.
I think one are cats that are pets and owned by people. Should we still? And the other thing is just feral cats, stray cats. I think it's almost, what are you going to do about those?
Okay, well, we'll take a look at the information that
Yeah.
you provided to us, and does that
Great.
have contact information if we need to reach you?
Sure, it's right there.
Okay.
Thanks a lot.
Very good. Thank
all.
you.
Take
Have a
care.
good
Keep
evening.
warm.
Okay, great. Okay, moving back into our agenda, we'll move into the announcements. The first announcement that I wanted to make is about the annual EAC conference that's put on by PEC. This year it's going to be held April 10th, Saturday, at Abington Friends School in Jenkintown. And our own Josh Hilbert has volunteered to be on the organizing committee for the conference. So Josh, I don't know if you have a report out on that or can tell us anything more about the conference.
Yeah, I wouldn't call it a report, but I can tell you a little bit about the conference. It is intended to provide the attendees with two opportunities to listen to a speaker of a topic of their interest. So when you go to the conference, you'll be able to choose maybe one of 4 panelists to go listen to, and then on the second session, you'll be able to go to one of those 4 same panelists who will be presenting again for another hour or so. And the topics are going to include water use, land use, energy use, so kind of runs the gamut of some environmental issues.
Do you know, will there be any presentations on some of the greenhouse gas inventories and action plans that we're working on?
We're working on that right now. I'm putting together the speakers. We confirmed today a speaker from the Haverford Township's Environmental Council, who had put together their greenhouse gas inventory and their action plan, and we're going to hopefully hear about how they put together their target goals, how they created an action plan, and then how they went about implementing that, and maybe the challenges that they found during the process. I think it'll be particularly helpful for us as we go into that process.
Great.
And you mentioned the date and the time and the place, right?
Right.
Okay.
Abington Friends School in
Abington Friends,
Jenkintown.
Jenkintown. Yeah.
Very good. Thank you. And thanks for volunteering. I think that's great for Radnor to have a presence in that group.
Yeah, no problem.
The second thing that I wanted to mention is an upcoming presentation, a homeowner stream bank stabilization program that's been organized by the Radnor Conservancy and co-sponsored by our EAC. It's going to take place February 9th at 7 p.m. in the Windsor Room at the Radnor Memorial Library. It's a free workshop designed to address the actions that landowners can take if they have a stream on their property to prevent erosion. To make sure that the stream banks are stable. They'll discuss how streams work, what causes instability and erosion, and then talk about steps that can be taken to avoid that. They also indicate that the first 20 attendees are going to receive a free native seed mix to plant near your stream banks. So any folks that do have streams running through their property or nearby their property are encouraged to attend, and you can RSVP to the Radnor Conservancy at radnor.conservancy@comcast.net. Okay. I also have an announcement regarding two programs that the Lower Merion EAC is organizing. They had sent us notice of this and asked us to share it. You can attend these programs even if you don't live in Lower Merion. One is a home composting education program to be held March 20th at 10 a.m. It'll be at the Lower Merion Township Administration Building in Ardmore. It costs $40.50 to attend, and that includes the cost for both the workshop and a compost bin. So for those that might have been thinking about getting a compost bin and not sure where to get it or what to do, because maybe they missed our composting session, then you have a second chance. Likewise, they're also having a rain barrel workshop, and I know we had one here in Radnor last year, but if anyone missed it and they're still looking to learn about that, there'll be workshop in Lower Merion again at the Township Building, March 27th at 10 a.m. That costs $69, but the cost includes the workshop and a rain barrel. You can register at, I think, www.lowermerion.org. If that's not correct, going there will at least give you the information on where to register. Does anybody else have other announcements?
Brenda, I have one.
Okay.
The Delaware Valley Regional Planning Commission is organizing a Route 30 corridor study, and they're looking for a Radnor Township liaison for that study. I'm not exactly sure about what the study is going to be about, other than the fact it's going to be about Route 30. But I do know that the western extent of the corridor that they're considering is fairly close to our township boundary. So we're at the westernmost edge of the study, if I'm not mistaken. And I think there's a meeting coming up on February 18th. That might be the first meeting of this study.
Okay.
And they're looking for a Radnor Township liaison.
All right. And I think that Matt Bauman is going to be able to attend part of that meeting, but not the whole meeting. And I think they were looking for EAC members to turn out for that as well.
What was the date of that again, my first meeting?
18th? Is that what you said, Josh?
February.
18th.
Interested people should contact the
I have an email address for a gentleman who works at the DVRPC named Kiet Long. I don't have his...
He's at Peck.
I'm sorry, he's at
actually.
Peck.
Right.
But he's the one that's been sending, he's been sending the emails out about the DVRPC study. So I can forward the email address to anybody that's interested.
Okay.
And you should probably get in touch with Matt Bauman, too, to coordinate.
I had a quick announcement, the first announcement of the annual Darby Creek cleanup, and that'll be on April 24th, Saturday, April 24th. And the contact information for that can be found at the Darby Creek Valley Association's website, which is dcva.org.
Okay, great. We will next move into our work group reports and discussion, and the first work group that we have is the Climate Protection Work Group. And if anyone missed it, Josh did a great presentation to the Board of Commissioners on Monday night. I simply did an introduction. Josh took care of the substance of all of that.
You give the moral support was on your shoulders.
And presented to the Board of Commissioners the results of the greenhouse gas inventory. It was nice. They had questions about it, seemed interested, and are anxious for us to move into the action plan. They were looking for a schedule as to when we'll have it done. So I think we need to get ourselves organized, maybe have another meeting of the subgroup that's working on that to put together a schedule to kind of keep us moving along. And I know we were going to reach out and try to get some action plans from other communities to see what they had done. And I know that you're working on that.
Right.
So maybe, Josh, if you want to send an email around, maybe to the whole EAC and put out some dates, just in case anybody else who hasn't been participating wants to join the group.
I think it's a good idea. I think everybody probably has a couple ideas in their
Right.
head that could probably contribute.
Okay. You know, and it might actually be good if we can get somebody from the township to attend one of the preliminary meetings too, just to have an idea as to some of the things the township's already doing that maybe we aren't taking account of. So,
Is there going to be one person that knows all, or, I mean, that
well, I
might
think
be a
there may
tough-
be one person that knows where we can get the information. I don't know if there will be one person that knows all.
You're thinking of Matt.
I'm thinking of Matt, but I know he's so busy.
Yeah.
But that's who I am thinking of. So
Well-
maybe we can reach out to him, and if he's too busy, he can delegate it to an appropriate person.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I'd just like to compliment you both for the presentation. I thought it was a really interesting presentation, and it was nice how you pointed out the different people who helped on the project. Villanova, the Sierra Club, obviously people on the EAC, so I thought it was a real highlight for the
Great.
township and the EAC. So-
Well, thank you. Thank you.
And we have to keep moving forward.
Charging ahead. That's right. We have a lot of work ahead of us. Now is the really important things. Now we've figured out where we are. Now we have to figure out where we're going.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, next up, Robin has a report for us on your trip to Copenhagen, right? Talk about
I
all
do.
of the things that you experienced and learned there.
Unfortunately, I didn't plan ahead, and my PowerPoint it doesn't work for the township system. So I'm going to have to just talk, and I don't have any pretty pictures to engage you. But I think what I'll just spend a few minutes, and what I wanted to do was describe a little bit of what the whole point of Copenhagen was, and a little bit talk about what the atmosphere was like, and then some of the take-home messages. So, first of all, this was the culmination of negotiations that began in 2007 in Bali, and actually to just give us a sense of what the sense of urgency was building up to Copenhagen. Coming out of Bali, the chair of the International Panel on Climate Change Analysis, I forget exactly the name, but an Indian man by the name of Dr. Pachauri, coming out of Bali, he said that what we do in the next 2 to 3 years will determine our future. This is the defining moment, because the sense was by then that climate changes and global warming and the effects are really happening faster than was anticipated. So over the last couple of years, the United Nations has been conducting panel negotiations among the countries, and there actually are 192, now 193 countries that are involved in these negotiations. What they have been doing is figuring out how the agreements that were established back in 1992 through the the UN convention was, when it was established in Rio, that was addressing the fact that climate change had been was the result of mainly the development and fossil fuel use by developed countries. And so the sense was that the developed countries really needed to step up and control their emissions. What's happened in the interim is we see that as developed countries have been controlling their emissions, there's another huge problem, and that is that as the developing countries move forward and they mechanize and industrially develop, they're on a path that is unsustainable. Their emissions are beginning to really become a huge problem, to the point where we've just had a crossover between the U.S. emissions, which have been the largest and about a fifth of all of the emissions in the world, and China, and we've now crossed, and China is on a yearly basis emitting more than we are. However, the U.S. has contributed to what's estimated at about 30% of all the greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. So we have a big responsibility. And we have not been a participant in recent years. We did not sign the Kyoto Protocol, which was the agreement for developed countries to actually commit to reducing their emissions by a certain amount. What happened in 2007 in Bali was that there was a recognition that this Kyoto Protocol was not sufficient, and that there was a need for an international treaty that would embrace all of the countries. It would enlist the help of the developing nations to grow sustainably and, choose a low carbon development path and be part of the solution. And it would also get all of the developed countries, including the United States, to be part of the solution. So this was really the path coming forward to Copenhagen, was continuing to try and make progress with the Kyoto countries, but also to come up with another treaty that the nations would sign. Well, during the course of 2009, it became very clear that what was very important on the part of developing countries, particularly China and India, was to know that the U.S. was serious about controlling our emissions, since we have such a huge role. And the way that we could really show that we were serious was for us to pass a law at the federal level, and a national law that would commit the United States to reducing its greenhouse gas emissions. And that, so that was their expectation. And in the U.S., there was an expectation that we really needed to see from India and China that they were serious about controlling their emissions. And so all throughout the year, there was this kind of catch-22, and it ended up not being resolved before Copenhagen. And so all of the countries came together there without being really prepared to negotiate a treaty. It was, by the time the dialogue in Copenhagen occurred, it was clear that the job wasn't going to get done there, that there was going to need to be more negotiation going forward. But there was a need to come together and to try and build as much support for moving forward as possible. So that was the overall setup into which these talks happened. It was an amazing experience, because there were people from all over the world, from small island nations that are dealing with sea level rise now as a result of the global warming that's already occurred, and there were people from all the African nations throughout Asia, public officials from the local and state and national levels, and so it was a real mixture of cultures and perspectives. The huge problem was that the UN had not anticipated the numbers well. And so the size of the venue was about appropriate for a third of the people that were there. And so what ended up happening was, for the first week, there were a lot of ministerial discussions and the side events and all that kind of thing, and that was kind of crazy because there were too many people. But then the heads of state elected to come to the negotiations in larger numbers than were anticipated, and that created a security nightmare. And so by the last 3 days of the negotiations, the UN had to exclude most of the non-delegate attendees. And so a lot of people from all over the world who'd come to Copenhagen to, be there and be trying to urge the nations forward, they were excluded, and there was tremendous frustration over that. And so a lot of that frustration spilled over into the streets. I won't go on at great length, but I wanted to just mention a couple of things that are very important. And that number one, like any event where the press is looking for a good angle, there was a peaceful march of 100,000 people the first Saturday of the negotiations, and people from all over the world just with different costumes and different signs, and there was a wonderful sign that said, "There is no planet B." 99% of it was peaceful. And there were some, bad actors, and there were actually some young anarchists from Denmark who were there to try and stir up trouble. And, I happened to be close enough to see that the police did a very good job of containing that and keeping it from becoming, from kind of exploding. The press covered that with, violence in Copenhagen, and, kind of blew it into front page coverage with, pictures of that little bit of violence. So unfortunate. It just kind of raised the temperature, unfortunately. I would say in terms of what happened with the negotiations, by the time that the heads of state arrived, things were really at quite a standstill, and it was looking as if the talks were going to fall apart altogether, and that there wouldn't even be some commitment to move forward. And this was a result partly of such huge expectations on the part of particularly the island and African nations on the need for all of the countries to understand the urgency that they see. I mean, they are dealing with drought impacts. They're dealing with countries that are whose water supply is particularly dependent on glacial melt. They are dealing with the reduction in the water supply now, and so this tremendous sense of urgency wasn't really resulting in forward movement, and so there was big frustration. At any rate, the U.S. had a presence of, a big presence there for the first time in a number of years, and there were 6 cabinet secretaries that were there, and then President Obama arrived on the last day when there was still the hope that something would happen to prevent a complete failure. And in fact, he came in the morning, and he was in intense negotiations for 11 hours with the key countries that are responsible for emissions today. Between India and China and Brazil and South Africa and the U.S., they together make up about 80% of the greenhouse gas emissions currently. And so he was in intense negotiations first with them, and then with a larger group of countries to try and get them on board with a deal that would be the basis for an agreement that they would then try and bring to the 193 nations. One of the major features is a commitment that President Obama put forward, which was a reduction in emissions from the U.S. That are basically the basis for our domestic legislation that's in the process right now. Those numbers, 17% reduction from 2005 by 2020 is considered woefully inadequate when you look at the science. And yet, politically, it's where the president was coming into Copenhagen. So he was boxed in by that situation, but that was what he was putting forward as what the U.S. was willing to commit to. And he was insisting that China agree to verify that the emission reductions that they were agreeing to make. And I know I'm going over, but I'm just a couple more minutes. So there was a difference of view that was pretty strong between China and the U.S. And over the course of the day, really largely as a result of his leadership, there was a Copenhagen Accord that was written that committed the developing countries that signed onto it to reduce their emissions by an amount that they would put forward by the end of this month, and that developing countries who signed on would agree to take actions to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions. The developed countries would develop funding to help the developing countries address both their needs to move forward with sustainable development and also to deal with what's called adaptation, which is confronting the impacts of climate change on their communities and on their natural systems. So a lot of effort to reduce deforestation and other big contributors to the problem, and also to deal with, communities that are in the path of rising sea levels, that kind of thing. And finally, an agreement to come back and revisit the overall limit in greenhouse in temperature rise that they're seeking to meet, and that it was put at 2 degrees Celsius to try and limit the increase below that, because that's been perceived as a tipping point. But revisit that in 2015. And many of the island nations are already feeling that that is not a tight enough limit, that we actually need to keep the temperature increase below that. So this was a act of faith to tell them, okay, well, we will come back and look at that and see if in fact it's not sufficient. The accord was greeted with very mixed views on the part of these, a lot of these nations that weren't at the table, and so it wasn't adopted by the Copenhagen plenary session, but it was recognized as, all of the countries agreed to take note of it, and it now becomes the political basis for the discussions that will go on through the rest of this year, and the UN meeting. There will be a UN meeting of all of the nations at the end of 2010 in Cancun, and there's a hope that a treaty can be concluded at that point, and then that would need to be ratified. 2 very quick things. First of all, the side events were fascinating. While the negotiations were going on, there were also all these local officials and state officials and speakers, and a very interesting panel discussion of mayors from around the world, all of them with sustainability programs in place, from Johannesburg, South Africa, from India. Greg Nichols, the mayor from Seattle, who launched the mayor's climate agreement, that Radnor's commitment is based on. He was there and speaking about, what they're doing, and the whole message of many of the mayors at that panel and other discussions was, we're doing things now. We just need the financial support to put these programs, to really build them into what's going to continue to make a difference. So that was a very hopeful kind of counterpoint to the frustration we were seeing. The other thing I would say is that the city of Copenhagen, while the venue was kind of a disaster, it was amazing. 30% of the working people commute by bicycle. and they have dedicated bicycle lanes that are not for pedestrians. These are just for bicycles, and pedestrians better stay out of the way because they're moving quickly. And we were there. It was quite cold, unusually cold, which was a crazy kind of irony. But the families taking their children to school, and that, it's pretty far north, so it gets light a little bit later and it gets dark a little earlier. So going to school, you see all these tiny little kids in snowsuits getting loaded onto the bike seats of their parents' bicycles, or a lot of them the parents had a bicycle with instead of a front wheel, they had a front either car, a bicycle seat, or even a bin on wheels that had a lid, and so the kids could be inside this sort of little compartment and wheeled off to school. But it was wonderful to see two things. First of all, children at a very early age just out there in the weather, just dressed properly, and no fear of the cold, and also just to see all the people commuting by bicycle. It was really quite exciting. So there's so much to do here in the U.S. At the national level, obviously, with moving forward with passing legislation that really puts us on a path. But I think we can be very appreciative that the president was really putting the U.S. back in the game with these talks. But also at the state and local level, I mean, it's just clear that there's a need for us to just really move forward. And, meeting some of the people who are from countries that are dealing with the impacts now, you just have a firsthand sense of urgency that you get. So thank you for the chance to
That was
report.
great. That was really interesting. We really appreciate your giving a report on that.
Sure.
And are there things that you learned in sort of hearing some of those mayors talk that would be helpful here to us in Radnor?
Well, I think
terms of
that there's
sustainability programs?
the ICLEI actually presented, or ICLEI hosted one of the mayor's sessions. I would say one of the two areas that are receiving a tremendous amount of focus are, number one, just city planning around retrofitting existing buildings and really trying to reconcentrate on built communities and revitalizing them as a way to both improve the quality of life, but also save energy through making cities more more population centers, and discouraging sprawl, mass transportation, but all of the measures that we talk about as being appropriate in the U.S. I mean, mayors from elsewhere also speaking in the same terms. So transportation and revitalization were the big focuses, and city planning around both of them.
Were there any organizations that you saw presenting or you saw being very active that were particularly impressive that people who might want to be involved in should know about? Were there?
Well, I would say I was there as a delegate for the Sierra Club, and we are a member of an international coalition called the Climate Action Network. And if you just Google Climate Action Network, you go to their website, and they have a huge array of materials that are very helpful in terms of the history of the negotiations and the problem, all of the research, summarizing the research. So that's one very good source. All of the national organizations and international organizations that you can think of are, all have their own material up on their websites at this point. Another great source for documentation on the problem is the World Resources Institute, and that WRI.org, and they have a lot of graphic material that's very helpful. For example, that crossover between the U.S. and China. They have a map of the world that shows where the greenhouse gases come from, so by percentage, and that's fascinating. So a lot of that material, and in that regard, I will say that one of the crazy backdrops was to be making firsthand acquaintances with people from developing countries dealing with climate change, and knowing that back home, the newspapers are full of this climate skepticism, which was just so odd, because that was hacking into some email, but there's so much science, there's so much firsthand witnessing of the problem that it was just a complete disconnect.
On that topic, I wonder if those same scientific groups are going to issue another statement in support of the original findings, or was there any discussion about whether there will be, after this scandal and the email leaks, will there be a supplement to reiterate the findings that were so broadly supported,
Right.
Recently?
Well, I actually don't know. I know that the fifth IPCC report is in process, so that will be coming out. Whether that has some kind of introductory statement about how, the science is established, they're, just recognizing that this bit of the correspondence was not. I mean, they may need to deal with it as a group of scientists, and I don't know what is planned there. I do know that there have been some other instances, and I read a fascinating description by a Himalayan ice pack scientist, and his findings had been misrepresented by a journalist. And so the journalist was found to have committed the scientist to saying that the particular glacier would melt by 2035, but the scientist hadn't said that. And so, and that got blown out of proportion, but, the glacier is melting. It's not a question of it's melting, it's a question of when. And so, anyway, what's happening is there's this kind of gotcha mentality that's going on with some of the coverage. That's unfortunate. The other thing I would just say, just to mention a couple of other groups, there's a group of organizations, and I think you can, the Indigenous Environmental Network is a very interesting group, quite edgy, but they are dealing with the fact that in a lot of parts of the world, indigenous peoples are being displaced by either the cultivation of alternative fuel feedstocks like the jatropha trees and different things. So there are big agribusiness efforts to come buy up cropland and produce alternative fuel feedstock. And the other is to harvest oil. And the most extreme example, and there was a very interesting panel discussion about it, is tar sands production from Alberta, Canada. And it is the largest industrial extraction operation on the planet and visible from outer space. It is monumentally destructive, and it is producing oil that is 3 to 5 times as higher in carbon emissions than regular gasoline. So it's a huge problem, and so that was fascinating. And they are the Indigenous Environmental Network. They're quite interesting.
I've been listening into the audiobook Hot, Flat, and Crowded. I don't know if you and I just at this section where they were talking about some of the challenges faced by Indigenous people, and they were talking about an organization called Conservation International. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you're familiar with that,
yes.
But it sounded like they were kind of targeting Indigenous people to try to help them identify how they can kind of benefit by saving the natural resources
Right.
around them and sort of,
Absolutely, and that's what's an amazing thing is that the indigenous people in Alberta, I mean, that is a huge carbon sink. Those forests there, we need to be saving them and protecting them and letting them work as effectively as possible because they're absorbing carbon dioxide. So, we're not only destroying them, but then extracting the oil that's going to make things worse. So absolutely, and that's a very good point. And that's, I think, trying to get a control over deforestation is considered one of the very big and important challenges that the treaty needs to address, and how to help fund that, have the developed countries step up and help fund that.
Great. Well, thank you very much,
Sure.
Robin. Really appreciate that report. We're going to make one more change in our agenda. We're going to skip from, Josh, if you don't mind, I know you have a couple other things to, we'll come back to you, but to skip down to Heather Riley's reports out of the Community Environmental Education and Awareness, so she needs to leave early. She's going to start with a report on the changes to Radnor's trash, recycling, and yard waste collection.
Hi, thank you, Josh. Sorry, I've got 2 kids out there and one in dance class and whatever. All right. So what I wanted to talk about is, as I'm sure you all know, and you received letters about the changes in the recycling and trash program. And so it's great that we got something written, information. Every household should have received it. It was in a regular size envelope from the township. And I just wanted to briefly give you the highlights of some of the changes and what we should be excited about and look forward to. Starting February 1, if you go on Radnor.com, you can click on the Green Radnor link. You can click on Public Works and go to Recycling. If you go to Green Radnor, you click on Trash and Recycling and Compost. Hopefully that will be changed to Yard Waste as well. And click on that, and then the words Recycling or Refuse, and then the new guidelines come up. It's also on the announcements page on the home page saying new guidelines. So we are doing single stream recycling, which means, in a nutshell, you can blend your paper and your plastics. The big news is instead of just plastics number 1 and 2, now you can do plastics 1 through 7. So what you do is just look on the bottom and see which numbers it has, and we're assuming all of these things will be recycled. This is going to be easier for them to collect. We have a reduced staff. You'll see that they're collecting them more in what you think of as a garbage truck as opposed to the recycling trucks. And I guess there was a lot of labor involved in keeping them separated and even running them back and forth to empty them out. So single stream, that's the big news. You can use your same recycling container. You can get a new one. You can use your own from home. You do need to get a sticker from the township. You can come down and get that for free from Public Works that says recycling on it. I'm sure if you found some way to mark recycling, just so they know that that's what it is. For me, what I think is really exciting is the yard waste pickup on Wednesdays. And so now I think a lot of people have, just for convenience, put yard waste in the garbage. We're not talking about, it's still the same thing for leaf pickup during the fall, but every Wednesday except holiday weeks, so like this past one with Martin Luther King Day, there is no yard waste pickup on weeks where there's a holiday on the Monday or the Friday. But otherwise, every Wednesday there is yard pickup, and in your what was sent to you and also on the website, they're very clear. This is a great time to think of the guys who pick up your recyclables, your yard waste, and your trash. Like, make it nice for them. Tie your sticks in bundles, no longer than, I think it's 3 feet long. If you can use a 35-gallon container, but they want it to fit in there. You see some of these things, and they look like planted trees in a garbage can, and I am guilty. But so they're really looking for you to either bundle it up or put it in a container and have it fit in the container.
And actually, I think that's really big because I think in the past there's been issues about, well, do you need to go down and buy those bags at the hardware store, the biodegradable bags? But now if you can just put it in a container and that'll be it, and then you reuse that container over and over again.
And they do say biodegradable bags. You do not have to go buy a bag. You can use bags from the grocery store that you have. You can bundle it up, you can put it in containers. And this hopefully will really reduce the amount of trash that we produce. Because this does go to the compost farm. It's not done in Radnor. It is Delaware County. But the point is it's not going to go in landfill, which is great, which also reduces methane gas from the landfill. So it will be interesting to see how much this reduces the garbage. Because once you take out your recyclables, once you take out your plastic and you take out your yard waste, you just shouldn't have that much garbage. And if you're composting, then you really don't have any garbage to speak of. So those are the big things. Again, Wednesdays, not during holiday weeks. And plastics, you can put it all together. It's going to make it simpler. I do know certain people really struggle with how we're going to have all these different places to recycle, in my kitchen. But now you can put it all in one area if that helps you. If you already have a system that's working for you, just keep it. It's the same. It just means they're going to mingle it when they collect it. And don't put plastic bags in your recyclables. Those go to the grocery store. I am on my list of things to do is to find out whether those are actually being recycled. But the stores are required to take them. You can bring in your dry cleaning bags. You can bring in other clear plastic bags. But they do say that the sorting machine gets messed up with the recyclables if you put the plastic bags in there. And you're not to put your plastic recyclables in a plastic bag. Put them in a container or a paper bag. Questions?
Question, Heather. Do you know, are they using a different service on the back end, or is it?
It's Covanta.
It is Covanta?
It is Covanta. They probably just have, as far as I understand it.
And so
Well, Covanta is where the trash
trash
goes.
It's where the
for
Right,
trash
but the
incineration.
recycling, I'm sure doesn't go to
Oh, right.
Covanta. I don't know
No,
where it
so
is
it's-
going. but-
I'm sorry, yes.
Okay.
So it probably is a different, or they've gotten the same machinery. I'm not sure. I was not able to reach the Hagens, so I don't know. But it is single stream.
And it is getting recycled.
Yeah, I think it's sort of different. But I was wondering, how detailed do you think the reporting's going to be on that recycling stream? Because it'll be really interesting to see just the mix. And the mix will help us assess the savings, greenhouse gas-wise as well as.
My understanding is that Peggy Hagen has to do reporting to the state in order for us to get the grants. And I know that the reporting that she's done in the past has broken it all out. So I assume she'll have to continue to do that in order for us to continue to get grant money. But,
Yeah.
that may be something that we can check into.
Good.
Yeah,
Um,
okay.
Yeah, and it would be nice to see the difference in the trash
Right.
amounts.
Good,
Um,
thank you.
All right.
And the other thing that is near and dear to Heather's heart, this issue of reusable bags. Lower Merion has reached out to us that they are considering doing a reusable bag campaign, similar to what you've suggested in the past, Heather, where they, get bags, encourage people to buy them, only use them, but to perhaps do it on a regional basis. There's a model in California that they were looking at, and they reached out to us and said, "Are you interested?" And I said, "This is near and dear to Heather's heart. We probably are interested. Do you have any kind of a plan or a proposal or something like that that you can give to us so that we can consider it?" And they said they'd work something up and then send it over.
And that does inspire me to look more into whether they're actually recycling plastic bags, because I do think if people find out that those aren't getting recycled, that might get them more interested in using some other kind. And also, I don't know any store that doesn't provide reusable bags. Every grocery
sale,
store.
right,
For sale.
right.
There really are a lot.
Okay, great.
Sounds great.
Well, thank you very much.
Your public is calling. Your people.
Okay, so we'll get back on the schedule and get back to Josh. The next item up was you were going to report out on DVRPC 2035 Connection Sustainability Plan?
Okay, sure, yeah, that's the plan that the Delaware Valley Regional Planning Commission put out, I believe it was at the end of 2009. And it was a four-part strategy to towards a sustainable future. And honestly, it's a fairly generic, I don't mean generic, I mean not detailed, broad type of plan with some very broad goals. But I have a summary for you. The 4 parts are to, 1, preserve open space and protect natural resources. Number 2, focus development into 100 existing livable communities in the Delaware Valley. 3, create green jobs and reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And 4, support intelligent planning and funding of transportation projects. I looked a little bit into more detail into their plan to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and create green jobs. Their plan is to, or their goal is to improve our air and water quality and reduce energy costs by promoting green jobs and by reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Their plan sets out to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 50% by the year 2035. And
50% down from 2005 levels?
50%, but yeah, I don't have that in
reason?
front of me. I'm not quite
Okay.
sure what their baseline year was.
I think a lot of folks are using, for the other inventory, they use 2005 as their baseline, so. I wonder
Right,
if
that's
they're
their
marking up,
latest
yeah.
inventory was 2005. They have some strategies to implement that, or to achieve that goal, but again, the strategies are fairly broad. For instance, complete the greenhouse gas inventory, what they just did. Let's see if I have anything good here.
Are these broad plans that they've made going to then be developed into specific action plans? So is it in progress?
That wasn't
or-
really clear when I read it
Yeah.
exactly what the next step
Okay.
was, because it certainly wasn't actionable. I mean, there were some ideas in terms of how to promote more communication between certain parties that might help develop benefits to companies to land in this area for green jobs, to create green jobs and that sort of thing. But I wouldn't say that it was actionable.
Okay.
But I'll as I learn more about it, I'm learning more and more about the DVRPC every week, and in my communications with some of the people that work there. Hope that maybe I can give you some more information later on.
Very good. Thank you. Appreciate it.
I'd be really interested to know if they're going to be focusing on building codes, because that seems to be something of growing interest. That is an opportunity to really have a big impact.
The final item under the Climate Protection Work Group is ICLEI membership, and I am pleased to report that the Board of Commissioners approved our renewal, and the check has been cut and the renewal application has been submitted. So we should be good to go in terms of getting those resources and having that available to us as we move forward with the action plan.
Wonderful, nice job.
Yeah, yes, well, don't give up on an issue, right? Okay, next is our sustainability work group. The first item there, I want to announce our next sustainability series is going to be a program addressing carbon footprinting, understanding emissions and carbon footprints, and we'll have Josh making another presentation of the Radnor Township emissions inventory. We will also have Haverford Township presenting, and they are a little bit ahead of us in that they did their inventory and they've done their action plan, and now they are beginning to implement it. So they'll talk a little bit about that. And then we're going to have some speakers who will discuss specifically how you can calculate your carbon footprint. And what we're going to try to do is have it geared both toward individuals that may be interested as well as businesses, so that we can reach the full audience, the full community here in Radnor. Next item under sustainability is the WaterSense partnership. As you recall, we had discussed becoming a promotional partner in the EPA WaterSense program, and Sloan did a fabulous memo of recommendation, which we then sent on to the Board of Commissioners, and they considered that at their meeting this past Monday night, and they approved it. So
Great.
Great job, Sloan, and we are good to go.
Thanks to your advocacy.
Thank you.
It didn't exactly squeak through. I think it was unanimous.
It was. So now we have work to do on that
We did.
front.
So I think the next steps are, I will work with Matt on the application to the EPA. It's not a very lengthy one, but I'll fill in what we can. It has to be signed by the township, and I believe Matt can sign for the township, so I'll get that ready for him. And then we'll work on a link on the website.
Good. With the
and-
logo that we're
with the
now allowed,
logo,
will now be allowed to
exactly.
use, right?
Exactly, and also I'll reach out to the EPA and talk to them about some materials that we might be able to send out in an email to township or to school
Right.
folks who might be interested.
And we might think about developing another page within the Green Radnor that's specifically devoted to water sense and water issues and water conservation. That might be a nice project, and I suspect they've got lots of information that we can use to develop that. So it should be, relatively easy thing that we can do. And
Okay. So I'll look into that and
okay,
report
great.
back.
Very good. And remember to coordinate with Heather, too, because she had
Okay.
said she wanted to reach out to the schools
Right.
and that there were some things she could do on that end.
Okay.
Great. Next item is open space, and wanted to let everyone know that Elaine Schaefer, as Commissioner Schaefer, is going to, I guess, revive the town's open space committee. I don't know that it's been very active recently, but she's going to get it going again. She'll be chairing it, and the EAC has a seat on that committee. And I had asked Anne if she would serve as our representative there, and she graciously agreed to do that. So thank you, Anne. So you can kind of keep us apprised of, what's happening as far as open space. I gather you haven't heard anything yet. Okay, all right, but that'll be good because obviously that's a very big issue in our
Yeah.
township. So it's nice that we can be part of that discussion.
I just read an interesting article on the, I'm not sure where it was published, maybe it was in the New York Times this morning about the emissions from manicured lawns. Did you guys read this? It just
Did
came out
not.
today, and the emissions from manicured lawns are greater than, maybe I think it was 4 times greater than the carbon offset that they provide by absorbing carbon.
Wow.
And that primarily comes from the
Fertilizers
no, from the equipment that is used to maintain it. So the blowers, the leaf blowers, the lawn mowers, and whatnot.
And the fertilizer.
And the fertilizer.
Yeah,
too,
right. I saw that. That was pretty amazing.
So not all open space is equal.
So I shouldn't
Okay.
cut my lawn this
Okay. All right. Next item under sustainability is the Classic Towns workshop, Josh, that you had attended. Want to give us an update on that?
Sure. Now, that was almost 2 months ago, so forgive me, but I did take some notes at the time, so that's good. I'm not sure they have an environmental advisory council. They have a group called Bluer, and they are following the same 5 milestone ICLEI framework that we are following in Westchester.
West.
I'm sorry, yeah, Westchester is Bluer, yeah. And they have a 10% emissions reduction goal from 2005 to the year 2015 is their goal, which is the second milestone in the framework. And I think a big part of that they may have already achieved, and that is they're purchasing 20% of the borough's electricity from wind. They're very proud of a zoning type initiative that they've created, and what it is it allows developers to exceed a 45-foot building height limit. That's part of their the code restriction in town, but builders are allowed to exceed that limit if they get that building Energy Star labeled prior to construction. And they see it as a way to both improve the efficiency of new construction and to focus development in tighter, I guess you could sort of increase dentity. It was another benefit to that. Now, they don't have any examples of any approved projects yet, but they're very proud of the process.
So this workshop that you attended was addressing specifically the things that Westchester has done to encourage sustainability in its community?
No, that was just
No.
one of the
Just one,
presentations
okay.
that I found most interesting. Also, the gentleman from Doylestown that you had spoken with about they have a green building ordinance there too. I got to learn a little bit more about that, and that's also a means for it's a means for Doylestown to promote energy efficient buildings by giving rebates back to builders in the form of reduced permitting costs. So he spoke about that program and about how successful that has been, and he claims it has been very successful and has very good participation percentage in terms of the number of buildings that are being built. There's a high percentage of people who are applying for the rebates.
Even in the economic slowdown, it hasn't.
Well, I'm not sure he spoke to whether there was a decrease in building. I'm sure there was, but he was just speaking of in terms of the percentage of the people who are building in the borough. A large percentage of them were applying for rebates for energy efficient buildings.
Did he say how that impacted his budget?
Yeah, he spoke about that, and there was a lot of questions about that, and he danced around a little bit. There has been no effect to his budget, he claims, and he claims that the additional amount of work to analyze these 6-page applications that the builders now have to apply to get these rebates hasn't caused any more full-time employees to have to come on board. So he claims he's okay. There was some other speakers, but this was a classic towns workshop, and these classic towns are several, I'm not sure how many, maybe in the 20s, that have been identified that are in the Delaware Valley that have a core business district and a certain walkability and a certain historic aspect to the town that somebody, I think the Classic Towns Committee in the DVRPC has designated these as classic towns, and turns out Wayne is one of them. I did not even know that. So one of the thing, and I mean, we all sort of knew it having lived here, but I didn't know that we were labeled as such. And there's it's a means for the Delaware Valley Regional Planning Commission to encourage people who are relocating to the area to relocate into some of these livable communities, and it's also an opportunity for these classic towns, for instance, Wayne, to promote themselves through the DVRP's website or the Classic Towns website. And so it was interesting, and I'm glad I went. And there is a little bit of follow-up to do to find out about whether or not our Radnor Township is taking any advantage of the the fact that we're labeled a classic town. I'm not sure we are, but certainly there's some linking of websites we can be doing and that such. So.
Okay, thank you very much. And I think probably some of the things that you heard about in terms of sustainable communities may be things that we incorporate here in Radnor as we move forward with action plans.
I think you're right.
On greenhouse gas emissions. Okay,
I agree, yeah.
very good. And did you also have a brief report, Josh, on a program that you attended regarding Green Building Lead for Homes?
Sure do.
You've been busy.
I know. Here's my notes. Okay. Yes, this is put on the Delaware Valley, put on by the Delaware Valley Green Building Council. They are a chapter of the U.S. Green Building Council, who is the home of the now famous in our circles anyway, the LEED program that helps identify or helps rate buildings. Our own LEED accredited or certified?
Accredited.
Accredited, thank you.
Buildings are certified, people are
People are
accredited,
accredited,
that's
so
right.
LEED AP accredited.
Thank you.
Brenda. So there is a program for certifying homes as LEED rated, and this presentation or this seminar was about the low-cost pathways to have your home certified, LEED certified, and this was really geared towards new construction and or gut refit jobs, not necessarily like saying, geez, my home here in Wayne, I'd like to get it LEED accredited. I'd like to do some projects towards that, because that's not what this was geared towards. So it spoke to how a LEED project can cost compete with a non-LEED project. And I guess the take-home message from the speaker was that there really is no reason why you shouldn't be doing a LEED project on a home, because he encouraged everybody to look at the life cycle cost of the home as opposed to the first cost of the home. So maybe the first cost of a LEED certified home would be maybe 5% more than we'll call it a standard home. But that 5% extra that you spend up front is paid back over time through reduced water usage, reduced energy usage. And he had some interesting ideas on how to get more points for your project, but it's not necessary to go into them right now. But basically, the basis of a rating is what's called a HERS index. I think it's a Home Efficiency Rating System index, and it helps you when you're designing a project understand how you're going to end up, because it's hard. You have to design a project based upon what you and hope that you're going to get a certain rating, and then when you're done, you have to actually verify that you did what you set out to do, and to get the LEED accreditation, the LEED certification. Anywho, let's see, is there anything else? Oh, and one idea I had, I thought might be interesting to talk about at some point in time is take advantage of the competitive spirit that a lot of our homeowners here in Radnor Township might have, and maybe have some kind of a competition, or encourage a informal competition amongst people to see how they can most improve their home's HERS index. For instance, somebody might start off with a very inefficient home and make a couple improvements, and then maybe improve their efficiency by 25%. That's very substantial. And somebody who has a very efficient home, they can still take some steps to improve their efficiency. So might be able to do something like that in Radnor.
Yeah, and perhaps as we move forward thinking about sustainability and actions, obviously we're focused on some things that the town can do, the township municipal operations can do. I mean, it's equally important for us to focus on the community, even though we decided not to try to inventory necessarily the community greenhouse gas emissions. I think that's going to be really key, because as you reported at the Board of Commissioners presentation, the emissions from the homes in Radnor as compared to the municipal operations are orders of magnitude higher.
About 25 times higher. That's
Right.
pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Right.
And a twist on your idea, maybe we could have some sort of recognition for the home that has the highest HERS rating in the town, and ask people to maybe submit candidates. I
Sure.
don't know if that's
Get
how
in-
feasible that is, but it seems to me, I like the idea of sort of giving recognition, also making a little bit of a competition to see who's got the most energy efficient home, and I'd like to know which one it is.
Instead of a garden tour, we could have an efficiency tour.
That's
Exactly.
right. That's not a bad idea. We'll put you in charge of getting that organized.
Exactly.
I do have a geothermal system now. I'm very proud of it.
That's right.
Actually
We
be
have
up
a
there.
starting point.
You might
Good.
be up there.
I have triple pane windows with that argon gas
Oh.
inside. Okay.
Wow. It's getting competitive.
See, there we
Look
go,
at
right? See, you can outgreen the next guy.
That's great.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Okay, and we've already taken care of community environmental education and awareness. Our liaisons are not with us tonight, so we'll move right on past the liaison reports. Is there any other old business that anybody has follow-up on? No? Okay. Any new business?
I actually thought of an announcement that I should have made, and I was trying to get the information on my phone and I never had any success. So this is going to be a little blurry, but I can provide more specific information. The Villanova Environmental Law Journal is sponsoring its annual symposium. I believe it's this Saturday. And the topic, they're going to have a number of speakers addressing the topic of the gas extraction process, the natural gas
Marcellus
extraction
Shale,
process. So
okay.
it's very timely and quite interesting, looking at a huge environmental issue for our state. So you can get more information on it by going to the, if you could on your phone, by going to the website for Villanova Law School, which is at www.law.villanova.edu. Or if you email me, I can give you the information. You can email me at poulin@law.villanova.edu, but it should be interesting.
That's the Marcellus Shale. Or-
Yes, that's right.
Great, thank you. Anything else? Okay, and we've done our public comment, so I think we're all set. Motion to adjourn. Thank you.